He appreciates me, my wife Elena said, twirling in front of our bedroom mirror wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The designer tag still dangled from the sleeve like a price of admission to a world I'd never been invited to join. I nodded from the doorway, watching her admire herself with the kind of satisfaction I hadn't seen on her face in years, certainly not when she looked at me. "That's nice, honey," I said, keeping my voice level. "Who's this generous soul again?" "Gerard Voss," she replied, not bothering to hide the dreamy quality that crept into her voice whenever she mentioned his name. "You know, the billionaire with the hotels and the art collection. He's 70, but he's so distinguished, so worldly." I knew Gerard Voss, all right. Everyone in our affluent lakeside suburb outside Boston knew about Jerry Voss. The man owned half the commercial real estate in 3 states, collected vintage cars like other people collected coffee mugs, and had been married to the same steel magnolia socialite for 42 years. Mrs. Charlotte Voss ran the charity circuit with an iron fist wrapped in Hermes gloves. "He appreciates me, Ian," Elena continued, smoothing the silk fabric over her hips. "He sees my potential. He understands what I bring to the table." What she brought to the table, apparently, was a willingness to accept expensive gifts from a married septuagenarian with more money than sense. But I kept that observation to myself. "Where did you meet this appreciative gentleman?" I asked, settling into the chair by our bedroom window. Outside, the October leaves were turning the colors of warning flags. "At the Riverside Country Club benefit last month. You were supposed to come with me, remember? But you had that property emergency." She said, property emergency, like it was something I'd invented to avoid social obligations, rather than a legitimate crisis involving a burst pipe that had flooded 3 units in one of my managed buildings. I ran a boutique property management company. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept food on our table. Elena had worked in marketing before we married, but she'd given that up 5 years ago to focus on networking and building social connections. What she'd actually built was an impressive collection of acquaintances who measured friendship by the thread count of your sheets and the vintage of your wine. "He sent a car for me tonight," she announced, checking her reflection one more time. "A real driver, not some rideshare situation. He's taking me to that new French place downtown, Le Bernardin's sister restaurant." I'd heard about that place. Reservations booked 6 months out, wine list that read like a mortgage payment. The kind of establishment where they served portions that would fit in a shot glass and charged accordingly. "Sounds expensive," I said. "Money isn't an object for Gerard. He told me himself. He likes to surround himself with beautiful things. He appreciates quality." The way she emphasized appreciates made it clear she felt this was something lacking in her current domestic situation. A car horn honked in our driveway. 2 short, polite beeps that somehow managed to sound expensive. "That's him," Elena said, grabbing a clutch purse that matched her dress. She paused at the bedroom door, looking back at me with something that might have been pity. "Don't wait up." After she left, I sat in that chair for a long time, watching the taillights disappear down our tree-lined street. The house felt different with her gone, not emptier exactly, but cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I went downstairs to my home office and opened my laptop. Gerard Voss had a Wikipedia page, naturally. Born 1954, inherited a small hotel chain from his father, built it into a hospitality empire worth an estimated $2.3 billion. Married Charlotte Pemberton Voss in 1982. 2 children, both grown, both working in the family business. Philanthropist, art collector, owner of homes in Martha's Vineyard, Aspen, and Monaco. The photos showed a man who'd aged well. Silver hair, expensive suits, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to check your bank balance before making a purchase. In every public photo, Charlotte Voss stood beside him, a woman who'd clearly never met a society photographer she didn't like. She had the kind of bone structure that suggested good breeding and the kind of jewelry that suggested even better investments. I closed the laptop and poured myself a scotch. The decent stuff, not the top-shelf bottle Elena had been saving for special occasions that never seemed to arrive. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Having the most wonderful time. Gerard is so fascinating. Don't know when I'll be home." I texted back, "Drive safely." But I knew she wouldn't be driving. Gerard Voss would make sure she got home safely, like the gentleman he undoubtedly was. The kind of gentleman who sent cars for other men's wives and bought them dresses that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. I finished my scotch and went to bed alone, but I didn't sleep much. Instead, I lay there thinking about appreciation and what it meant and what it cost. The next morning, Elena came home glowing. Not just happy, actually glowing, like she'd been plugged into some kind of expensive electrical socket that charged her batteries in ways our suburban life never could. "Gerard is incredible," she announced, kicking off heels that I was fairly certain hadn't been in her closet the night before. "He knows everyone, Ian. Everyone. The mayor was at dinner last night, and that woman who owns the Gallery District, and the Hendersons who just bought the old Whitmore estate." She was name-dropping like she was dealing cards, laying out her evening's social conquests across our kitchen counter. "He wants to take me to the Symphony Gala next weekend," she continued, opening the refrigerator and frowning at its contents like they'd personally disappointed her. "It's a $500-a-plate event. He said I'd be the perfect companion, someone who understands culture and sophistication." "That's quite a compliment," I said, buttering toast that suddenly tasted like cardboard. "He's thinking of starting a foundation," Elena went on, apparently not hearing the flatness in my voice. "Something focused on supporting women in the arts. He thinks I'd be perfect to help him develop the concept. He values my input. Values her input. Appreciates her potential. Understands her worth." I was starting to detect a theme. "When do you think you'll be seeing Gerard again?" I asked. "This afternoon, actually. He's taking me to look at a property he's considering for the foundation headquarters. He wants my opinion on the space." Of course he did. After Elena left for her afternoon of property consultation, I drove to my office in the historic district downtown. It wasn't much, 3 rooms above a bakery, with windows that looked out on the kind of tree-lined streets that made our town a favorite for location scouts filming movies about quaint New England life. My office manager, Kira, looked up from her desk when I walked in. She was 35, sharp as a tack, and had the kind of dry sense of humor that made even the most difficult tenants manageable. "You look like someone who's been thinking too hard," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Elena's made a new friend," I said, settling behind my desk. "A very wealthy, very generous new friend." Kira raised an eyebrow. She'd worked for me for 6 years, long enough to read between the lines of my carefully neutral tone. "How generous are we talking? Designer dress? Expensive dinners? Symphony Gala generous?" "Ah." Kira leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of attention she usually reserved for complicated lease agreements. "And this generous friend would be?" "Gerard Voss." Her other eyebrow joined the first. "The hotel guy? The one who's married to the woman who runs every charity board in the county? That would be him." "Well," Kira said after a moment, "that's interesting." Interesting was one word for it. I could think of several others, but none of them were particularly charitable. "Elena seems quite taken with his appreciation of her potential," I said. "I bet she does." Kira turned back to her computer, but I could see her thinking. "You know, my cousin works for the catering company that handles a lot of the high-end events in town. She might have some insights into Mr. Voss's appreciation habits." "What kind of insights?" "The kind that might help you understand exactly how special Elena's situation really is." I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering back to Elena and her appreciative billionaire. By the time I got home, she was already there, sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop open and papers scattered around her like she was planning a military campaign. "Perfect timing," she said without looking up. "Gerard wants me to research similar foundations in other cities. He's thinking Boston, New York, maybe something in California. He says I have excellent analytical skills." "I'm sure you do," I said, loosening my tie. "What kind of research are we talking about?" "Funding structures, board compositions, event planning, donor cultivation strategies." She looked up at me with shining eyes. "He's talking about a significant time commitment, Ian. This could be a real opportunity for me." "Sounds like it." He mentioned something about travel, too. Site visits to other foundations, meetings with potential donors. He has connections everywhere. I bet he did. "Elena," I said carefully, "you do realize Gerard Voss is married, right?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Of course I know that. This is business, Ian. Professional development. Charlotte Voss is lovely, but she's not interested in the day-to-day operations of a new foundation. She has her own projects." "Right. Her own projects. Like making sure her husband of 42 years didn't make any mistakes that might embarrass the family name or compromise their social standing. I'm just saying, it might be worth considering how Mrs. Voss feels about her husband's new professional partnership." Elena finally looked at me directly, and I saw something in her expression that I didn't recognize. It wasn't quite defiance, but it was close. "Gerard appreciates me, Ian. He sees my potential in ways that—" She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. In ways that I didn't. In ways that our marriage never had. In ways that our life together never could. "I see," I said. "Do you? Because sometimes I wonder if you really understand what I'm capable of. What I could accomplish with the right support, the right opportunities. The right billionaire, apparently." That night, after Elena had gone to bed early, she needed her rest for another lunch meeting with Gerard the next day, I sat in my office and made a phone call. "Brennan, Walsh and Associates," the receptionist answered. "This is Ian Mallory. I'd like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Walsh regarding a divorce." The designer bag started arriving on Tuesday. I came home from work to find Elena in our living room, surrounded by shopping bags bearing names I recognized from billboards and magazine advertisements. Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, a constellation of luxury brands that had previously existed only in Elena's daydreams and Pinterest boards. "Gerard took me shopping," she announced, pulling tissue paper from a handbag that probably cost more than my car payment. "He said I needed accessories that matched my new responsibilities." New responsibilities. That was what we were calling it now. "He has excellent taste," I said, settling into my chair and watching her unwrap her gifts like a child on Christmas morning. "He really does. He knows exactly what works, what projects the right image. He's been thinking about this foundation for months, Ian. He just needed the right person to help him bring the vision to life." She held up a silk scarf, admiring the pattern in the lamplight. The price tag was still attached, $450 for a piece of fabric I could use as a pocket square. "He's introducing me to people," Elena continued, draping the scarf around her neck and checking her reflection in the mirror above our fireplace. "Important people, the kind of connections that could open doors I never even knew existed." My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "Cousin says Voss has a type. Young, married, ambitious, usually lasts about 6 months." I deleted the message and looked back at Elena, who was now trying on a pair of earrings that caught the light like tiny chandeliers. "What kind of doors?" I asked. "Museum boards, cultural committees, philanthropic organizations. Gerard knows everyone, Ian. Everyone who matters. Everyone who mattered in a world where I apparently didn't exist." "He's taking me to the Whitmore Gallery opening tomorrow night," Elena said, admiring her reflection from different angles. "It's invitation only. The artist is some protege of Gerard's. He's been collecting her work for years." Sounds exclusive. It is. Gerard says there will be collectors there from New York, maybe even some international buyers. He wants me to meet them, to start building relationships in the art world. I wondered what Charlotte Voss thought about her husband building relationships in the art world with my wife, but I kept that thought to myself. The next evening, I watched Elena get ready for the gallery opening with the kind of care usually reserved for state dinners. She'd spent the afternoon at a salon, hair, makeup, nails, the full treatment. The bill had been charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. Gerard opened an account for foundation expenses, she explained when I asked about it. He wants me to look professional when I'm representing his interests. Representing his interests. The phrase stuck in my throat like a bone. She wore a black dress that hugged her in ways that made it clear she'd been spending time at the gym, paired with the new jewelry Gerard had helped her select. When she turned to show me the full effect, I had to admit she looked stunning. Not like my wife of 8 years, but like someone who belonged in the pages of a magazine I couldn't afford. "How do I look?" she asked. "Like $1 million, I said. Gerard says presentation is everything in his world. People make judgments in the first 30 seconds, so you have to make sure those 30 seconds count. His world. Not our world, not even her world. His world, which she was apparently visiting as a tourist with an extended visa. After she left, I poured myself a drink and did something I'd never done before. I looked up the Whitmore Gallery's website and checked their social media accounts. Sure enough, within an hour of the opening, photos started appearing. Elena, radiant and confident, standing next to Gerard Voss in front of paintings that probably cost more than my annual salary. In every photo, she looked like she belonged there, like she'd been born to hold champagne glasses and discuss abstract expressionism with people who owned vacation homes in the Hamptons. The captions identified her as Elena Mallory, arts consultant, which was news to me. As far as I knew, her experience with art extended to the reproduction Monet we'd bought at Target for our guest bathroom. My phone rang. Cliff Morrison, my oldest friend, calling from whatever job site he was working late on. Cliff was a contractor, the kind of guy who could build you a house from the ground up and fix your car on the weekends. He'd known Elena almost as long as I had, and he'd never been impressed by her social ambitions. "Saw the photos online," he said without preamble. "Your wife's making quite a splash in high society." "She's networking," I said. "That what we're calling it?" Cliff's tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear the concern underneath. "Ian, you know this guy's reputation, right?" "What reputation?" "Come on, man. Gerard Voss has been mentoring young women for decades. Always married ones, always ambitious ones, always ones who think they're getting the opportunity of a lifetime. And what happens to these ambitious young women? Eventually they stop being young, or they stop being grateful, or Charlotte Voss decides they've outlived their usefulness. Either way, they tend to disappear from the social circuit pretty quickly." I took a long sip of my drink, tasting the burn of whiskey and the bitter flavor of reality. "Elena thinks she's different," I said. "They all think they're different. That's what makes it work." After Cliff hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to remember the last time Elena had looked at me the way she looked at Gerard Voss in those photos. The last time she'd talked about our future with the same excitement she brought to discussing foundation business. The last time she'd worn a dress like that for me. I couldn't remember. The next morning, Elena came home with stories that tumbled out of her like water from a broken dam. The people she'd met, the conversations she'd had, the opportunities that were opening up like flowers in spring. "Gerard introduced me to the Hendersons," she said, making coffee with the kind of energy that suggested she hadn't slept much. "They're looking for someone to help them organize their private collection. It could be a consulting contract, Ian, real money. Real money, as opposed to the fake money I made managing other people's properties and dealing with tenant complaints and maintenance emergencies." "He also mentioned a trip," Elena continued, not quite meeting my eyes. There's a foundation conference in New York next month. He thinks I should attend, start making connections on a national level. A trip. Just a few days. Educational, really. Gerard knows people at the Ford Foundation, the Getty Trust, some of the major players in philanthropic arts funding. And Charlotte? Will she be attending this educational conference? Elena's smile flickered for just a moment. Charlotte has her own commitments. She's not as involved in Gerard's new projects. New projects. I was beginning to understand that Elena considered herself Gerard's newest project, and like all his projects, she was apparently receiving his full attention and considerable resources. When is this conference? I asked. Next weekend. Gerard's already made the arrangements. We'll fly up Friday morning, attend sessions Friday and Saturday, network at the evening events. Very professional. I'm sure it will be. That afternoon, I had my consultation with divorce attorney Michael Walsh. His office was in one of the restored colonial buildings downtown, all exposed brick and polished hardwood floors. The kind of place that charged by the hour and made sure you knew exactly how much each minute cost. Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp suit and confident handshake that suggested he was very good at what he did. "What can I do for you, Mr. Mallory?" he asked, settling behind a desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. "My wife is having an affair," I said, "with a married billionaire who likes to call it professional development." Walsh didn't even blink. Apparently, this was just another Tuesday in the divorce business. "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 weeks, officially, but I suspect it's been building for longer than that." "Evidence?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos from the gallery opening, the social media posts, the receipts I'd found for charges to credit cards I'd never seen before. "He's showering her with gifts," I explained. "Designer clothes, jewelry, expensive dinners. She's traveling with him, supposedly for business. She's completely infatuated." Walsh studied the photos with professional detachment. "And you want to file for divorce?" "I want to file quietly. She doesn't know yet, and I'd prefer to keep it that way until I understand my options." Smart. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but adultery can still affect property division, especially if marital assets are being dissipated. He looked up from my phone. "Any joint accounts she's been draining?" "Not yet. But she's been spending money I can't account for, and she's talking about quitting her consulting work to focus on this foundation project full-time." "What's your financial situation?" I gave him the rundown. The house, my business, our savings, Elena's nominal income from the occasional marketing consultation she still took on. Nothing complicated, nothing that would require forensic accountants or private investigators. "This should be relatively straightforward," Walsh said. "How do you want to proceed?" "Carefully. I want to understand what I'm entitled to, what she's entitled to, and what happens if she decides she'd rather be the billionaire's wife than mine." Walsh smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Mr. Mallory, I've handled cases like this before. Women who think they're trading up, men who think they can buy their way out of inconvenient marriages. It rarely ends the way anyone expects." "What do you mean?" "Billionaires don't get to be billionaires by making impulsive decisions about their personal lives. Gerard Voss has been married to Charlotte Pemberton Voss for over 40 years. That's not just a marriage. It's a business partnership, a social alliance, a financial empire. Your wife might think she's irreplaceable, but I guarantee you Charlotte Voss has seen this movie before." I left Walsh's office with a retainer agreement and a timeline for filing papers. The process would take months, but the wheels were now in motion. Elena could appreciate Gerard Voss all she wanted, but she was going to do it as a single woman. That evening, she came home with more bags and more stories and more plans for her expanding role in Gerard's world. She talked through dinner about the conference, about the people she would meet, about the opportunities that were opening up, like doors in a mansion she'd only dreamed of entering. Gerard says I have natural instincts for this work, she said, cutting her salmon with delicate precision. He thinks I could eventually run my own foundation, maybe something focused on supporting women entrepreneurs in the arts. That sounds ambitious. It is ambitious. But Gerard believes in thinking big, in not limiting yourself to what seems possible. He says most people never reach their potential because they're afraid to dream. And you're not afraid? She looked at me across our dining room table, and for a moment I saw something that might have been pity. I'm not afraid anymore, Ian. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid. After dinner, while Elena was upstairs packing for her educational conference, I sat in my office and looked at the divorce papers Walsh had prepared. All they needed was my signature, and Elena's chapter as Mrs. Ian Mallory would begin its final act. I signed them. The photographs from New York started appearing on Monday morning. I was having coffee and reading the news when Elena's social media accounts began lighting up with images from her educational conference. Elena in a cocktail dress that cost more than most people's rent, standing beside Gerard at what was clearly a private party, not a professional development seminar. Elena laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear while they stood on what looked like a hotel balcony overlooking Central Park. Elena wearing jewelry I'd never seen before, holding a champagne glass and looking like she'd been born to this life of luxury and sophistication. The captions told the story Elena wanted people to believe. Incredible learning experience at the National Philanthropic Arts Conference. So grateful to Gerard Voss for this opportunity to expand my horizons. But the photos told a different story. They told the story of a woman who had found exactly what she'd been looking for, and it wasn't professional development. She came home Sunday night, glowing with the kind of satisfaction that comes from having all your dreams validated by someone with enough money to make them come true. The conference was incredible, she said, unpacking clothes that hadn't been in her suitcase when she left. Gerard introduced me to everyone who matters in arts philanthropy, the head of the Mellon Foundation, the woman who runs the cultural programs for the Kennedy Center, collectors from London and Tokyo. Sounds educational. It was more than educational, Ian. It was transformative. I finally understand what I'm capable of, what I could accomplish with the right backing. The right backing, meaning Gerard Voss's checkbook and connections. He's offered me a position, Elena continued, hanging up a dress that still had Bergdorf Goodman tags attached. Executive Director of the Voss Foundation for Arts and Culture. It would be a full-time position, Ian. A real salary, benefits, an expense account. Congratulations. The foundation is going to be based in Boston, but there will be travel, site visits, donor meetings, conference presentations. Gerard wants me to be the public face of the organization. The public face. I wondered how Charlotte Voss felt about my wife becoming the public face of her husband's latest philanthropic venture. When would this position start? I asked. Next month. Gerard's attorneys are drawing up the paperwork now. He wants everything to be completely professional, completely above board. Completely professional. Right. That night, after Elena had gone to bed early, she needed her rest for another busy day of foundation planning. I called Kira. How was your weekend? She asked. Educational. Elena's been offered a job. Let me guess. Working for her appreciative billionaire friend. Executive Director of the Voss Foundation for Arts and Culture. Full-time position, travel required, expense account included. Kira was quiet for a moment. Ian, you know this isn't going to end well, right? I'm beginning to get that impression. My cousin had some interesting information about Mr. Voss's previous executive directors. I'm listening. There have been 3 in the past 10 years, all young, all married, all convinced they were going to revolutionize arts philanthropy. The first one lasted 8 months before Charlotte Voss had her removed from every board and committee in the city. The second one made it almost a year before Gerard lost interest and the foundation mysteriously ran out of funding. The third one tried to sue for wrongful termination and ended up settling for enough money to keep quiet and leave town. What happened to their marriages? What do you think happened? Turns out most husbands don't appreciate having their wives disappear into a billionaire's world of private jets and five-star hotels. After Kira hung up, I sat in my office and looked at the divorce papers I'd signed but not yet filed. Elena thought she was moving into Gerard's world, but she had no idea what that world actually looked like from the inside. She saw the luxury, the connections, the opportunities. She didn't see Charlotte Voss, who had been protecting her husband's reputation and her family's interests for over 4 decades. The next morning, Elena left early for a breakfast meeting with Gerard's attorneys. She was wearing another new outfit, something that managed to look both professional and alluring, paired with shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments. "We're finalizing the foundation structure," she explained, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Gerard wants everything legally sound, completely transparent." "I'm sure he does. He's also talking about expanding the scope. Maybe something international, partnerships with museums in Europe, cultural exchange programs. He thinks I'd be perfect to head up the international division." The international division. Elena was clearly thinking bigger than just Boston society now. After she left, I drove to my office and found Kira already at her desk, working through a stack of tenant applications with the kind of focused attention that made her invaluable. "You look like someone who didn't sleep much," she said without looking up. "Elena's been promoted, from executive director to head of international operations." That was fast. Gerard Voss apparently doesn't believe in limiting his vision. Kira finally looked up from her paperwork. "Ian, what are you going to do about this?" "I'm going to file for divorce and let Elena discover what Gerard Voss's world really looks like when you're not a tourist anymore. And if she doesn't want a divorce, then she's going to discover what it costs to appreciate someone else's husband while she's still married to me." That afternoon, I walked the divorce papers over to the courthouse myself. The filing fee was $200, a bargain considering what I was buying. The clerk stamped the documents with the kind of efficiency that suggested this was just another routine transaction in the business of dissolving marriages. Elena would be served within the week. Her lawyer would call my lawyer, and the process of untangling 8 years of marriage would begin. But I wasn't planning to wait for the legal system to deliver my message. That evening, I was waiting in the living room when Elena came home from another day of foundation planning. She looked radiant, energized, like someone who had finally found her true calling. "Perfect timing," she said, dropping her new handbag on the coffee table. "Gerard wants to have dinner with both of us this week. He thinks it's important for him to get to know the people in my life, to understand my support system." How thoughtful of him. He's like that. He really cares about the whole person, not just the professional side. He says successful partnerships require trust and understanding. Partnerships. The word choice was interesting. "Elena," I said carefully, "we need to talk." Something in my tone must have gotten her attention, because she finally looked at me directly, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. "What about?" I handed her the copy of the divorce papers I'd kept for myself. She stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been panic. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a divorce petition. I filed it this afternoon." "You're divorcing me?" "You're having an affair, Elena, with a married man who's old enough to be your father. Did you think I was just going to pretend not to notice?" She sank into the chair across from me, still holding the papers like they might burst into flames. "It's not an affair, Ian. It's professional. Gerard appreciates my talents, my potential. This is about my career." "Your career in what exactly? Being a billionaire's mistress?" "That's not what this is." But her voice lacked conviction, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Then what is it?" Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've decided you'd rather be appreciated by Gerard Voss than married to me. Gerard understands me in ways that—" She trailed off, but the implication hung between us like a sword. "In ways that I don't, in ways that our marriage never has, in ways that our life together never could." She didn't deny it. "Elena, I want you to be happy. If Gerard Voss and his foundation and his world of private jets and designer dresses make you happy, then you should have that. But you should have it as a single woman. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." She looked down at the divorce papers again, and I watched reality begin to settle over her like a cold fog. "What if I ended it?" she asked quietly. "What if I told Gerard I couldn't take the position, that I needed to focus on my marriage? Could you do that?" She was quiet for a long time, and in that silence, I had my answer. "I didn't think so," I said. "Ian, you don't understand. This opportunity, what Gerard is offering me, it's everything I've ever wanted. It's the life I was meant to live. Then live it, but live it honestly." That night, Elena slept in the guest room. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to think. We'll call later." She didn't call. Instead, I got a call from Michael Walsh. "Your wife's attorney contacted me," he said. "She wants to discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" "The kind that suggests she's not planning to contest the divorce, but she wants to make sure she's protected financially during the transition." "What kind of protection?" "Spousal support, division of assets, that sort of thing. Standard stuff, but her lawyer seems to think she's going to need some time to get established in her new career. Her new career as Gerard Voss's executive director, funded by Gerard Voss's foundation, in Gerard Voss's world." "Set up a meeting," I said. "Let's see what Elena thinks she's entitled to." The meeting was scheduled for the following week, but before it could happen, something interesting occurred. I was having dinner at Murphy's pub downtown, the kind of place where locals went to avoid the tourist crowds, when I overheard a conversation at the bar that made me nearly choke on my beer. Two women, both dressed in the kind of expensive casual wear that screamed old money, were discussing the latest gossip from the country club circuit. "Did you see Charlotte at the symphony board meeting?" one of them was saying. She was absolutely icy when someone mentioned Gerard's new foundation. "Well, of course she was. Everyone knows about his latest protégé, Elena something. She's been all over social media, acting like she's the next great philanthropist. Charlotte's not going to put up with it much longer. You know how she handled the last one. The one who tried to sue? That was brutal. Charlotte had her blacklisted from every organization in New England. This one might be different, though. She's married, which makes it more complicated. Not for long, from what I hear. Word is, her husband filed for divorce." I paid my tab and left, but their conversation stuck with me. Charlotte Voss knew about Elena. Of course she did. Charlotte Voss had been managing Gerard's indiscretions for 40 years. She probably knew about Elena before I did. The next morning, I got a call that changed everything. "Mr. Mallory, this is Margaret Chen from Chen, Patterson and Associates. We represent Mrs. Charlotte Voss." I nearly dropped the phone. "How can I help you, Ms. Chen?" "Mrs. Voss would like to meet with you. She believes you might have mutual interests regarding your respective spouses." "What kind of mutual interests?" "The kind that are best discussed in person. Would you be available for lunch today?" I met Charlotte Voss at the Riverside Country Club in a private dining room that overlooked the golf course where Elena had first encountered her appreciative billionaire. Charlotte was exactly what I'd expected, elegant, composed, with the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of managing a social empire. "Mr. Mallory," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Mrs. Voss, I have to admit I'm curious about what we might have to discuss." She smiled and it was sharp enough to cut glass. Your wife, Mr. Mallory, and my husband's regrettable tendency to mistake business relationships for personal ones. We ordered lunch. She had the salmon, I had the chicken, and she got straight to the point. Elena is not Gerard's first protégé, she said, cutting her fish with surgical precision. She won't be his last, but she might be the most problematic, because unlike the others, she seems to believe this is going somewhere permanent. What makes you think that? She's been telling people she's going to be running multiple foundations, traveling internationally, representing Gerard at major cultural events. She's planning a future that doesn't include you, but also doesn't seem to understand her actual position in Gerard's life. Which is? Temporary, replaceable, and ultimately disposable. Charlotte took a sip of her wine and studied me with eyes that missed nothing. I understand you filed for divorce. I have. Smart. Elena's going to need to be single for what comes next. What comes next? Charlotte's smile widened, and for the first time, I understood why Gerard Voss had stayed married to her for 42 years. She was terrifying. Mr. Mallory, your wife is about to learn the difference between being appreciated and being valued. I thought you might like to watch. Charlotte Voss's plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. The foundation, she explained over coffee and dessert, doesn't actually exist yet. Oh, Gerard's been talking about it, planning it, even having his lawyers draw up preliminary paperwork. But nothing has been filed, no money has been allocated, and no positions have been officially created. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Elena thinks she's already been hired. Elena thinks a lot of things that aren't quite accurate. She thinks Gerard is going to leave me for her. She thinks she's irreplaceable in his affections. And she thinks she's about to become one of the most powerful women in arts philanthropy. And the reality? The reality is that Gerard is 70 years old, has a heart condition that requires careful management, and depends on me for everything from his medication schedule to his social calendar. The reality is that I control the family trusts, the charitable foundations, and most of the business interests that make Gerard Gerard. And the reality is that I've been dealing with women like Elena for longer than she's been alive. Charlotte reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Elena's been very active on social media, hasn't she? All those photos from New York, all those posts about her exciting new career, all those mentions of her special relationship with Gerard. I nodded, remembering the stream of images that had been appearing on Elena's accounts for weeks. She's also been very free with her opinions about Gerard's marriage. Apparently, she's told several people that Gerard is trapped in a loveless relationship with a woman who doesn't understand his artistic vision. My stomach dropped. She said that? At the gallery opening 2 weeks ago, and at the charity luncheon last Tuesday, and at the private dinner party Gerard hosted for potential foundation donors last Saturday. Charlotte opened the folder and showed me printouts of social media posts, transcripts of conversations, even photographs of Elena at various events looking very much like she considered herself the lady of the manor. Your wife has been positioning herself as Gerard's partner in everything but name. She's been accepting credit for ideas that weren't hers, claiming relationships with donors she's never met, and generally behaving as though she's already running an organization that doesn't exist. What are you going to do about it? Charlotte's smile was sharp enough to perform surgery. I'm going to let Gerard's lawyers explain the legal realities of her situation. I'm going to let the social media posts speak for themselves when potential employers Google her name. And I'm going to let the philanthropic community draw their own conclusions about someone who claims credit for other people's work. And Gerard? Gerard will do what Gerard always does when his enthusiasms become inconvenient. He'll disappear to one of our European properties and let me handle the cleanup. I left the country club with a new understanding of exactly what Elena had gotten herself into. She thought she was playing in the minor leagues of suburban social climbing, but she'd actually wandered onto the field during the World Series of high society power games. That evening, Elena came home later than usual, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look radiant. She looked tired, maybe even a little worried. "How was your day?" I asked, genuinely curious about what Charlotte Voss's plan looked like from the inside. "Complicated," Elena said, dropping into her chair without bothering to show off her outfit or accessories. "There seem to be some legal issues with the foundation structure." "What kind of issues?" "Gerard's lawyers are saying there are complications with the tax status, something about federal regulations for international charitable organizations. They need to restructure everything." "That sounds frustrating." "It's more than frustrating, Ian. I've been telling people about this position for weeks. I've already given notice to my consulting clients. I've been making commitments based on this opportunity. If it falls through..." She trailed off, but I could see her mind working through the implications. Elena had burned bridges to get to Gerard's world, and now she was discovering that the bridge back might not be there when she needed it. "I'm sure it will work out," I said. "Gerard seems confident it will. But his lawyers want documentation of everything, every conversation, every commitment, every promise that's been made. They're treating it like I'm some kind of liability instead of an asset." Liability. Charlotte Voss had used the same word. Maybe they're just being thorough. Maybe. But Elena didn't sound convinced. The next morning, Elena left for another meeting with Gerard's legal team, but she was back within 2 hours, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. "What happened?" I asked. "They want me to sign a non-disclosure agreement," she said, sinking onto our couch, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "About the foundation. About Gerard. About everything we've discussed or planned." "That doesn't sound unusual for a business relationship." "It's not just a business NDA, Ian. It covers personal interactions, social media posts, even conversations with friends and family. If I violate it, I could be sued for damages that would bankrupt us." Us. Interesting that she was still thinking in terms of us when it came to potential financial ruin. "Did you sign it?" I asked for time to review it with my own lawyer. "And what did Gerard say?" "Gerard wasn't there. It was just his lawyers, and they made it very clear that signing the NDA was a condition of any future relationship with the Voss family interests." Elena looked at me with something that might have been panic. "Ian, what if I've made a mistake? What if this whole thing was just... What if Gerard was just what? Just amusing himself? What if I was never really being considered for anything permanent?" I could have told her about my lunch with Charlotte Voss. I could have explained exactly what Gerard's pattern was, how many other women had been through this same cycle, how the story always ended. But Elena needed to figure this out for herself. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked. "My gut tells me I'm in trouble." That afternoon, Elena's lawyer called. The NDA was ironclad and comprehensive, designed to prevent any public discussion of Gerard Voss's business or personal affairs. Signing it would protect Elena from immediate legal action, but it would also mean admitting that her relationship with Gerard had been based on false premises. "If I sign this," Elena said after hanging up with her attorney, "I can never talk about what happened. I can never use Gerard as a reference, never mention the foundation work on my resume, never even acknowledge that I know him socially." "And if you don't sign it?" "They'll sue me for misrepresentation, claiming I've been presenting myself as an official representative of organizations that don't exist." Elena was caught in a legal trap that was probably older than she was. Charlotte Voss had clearly done this before. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I've already told everyone about this opportunity. My consulting clients, my friends, even my mother. If I sign that NDA, I'll have to explain why my big career breakthrough suddenly disappeared." "And if you don't sign it?" "I'll be fighting a legal battle against people who can afford to keep me in court until I'm bankrupt." That evening, Elena sat in our living room with the NDA spread across the coffee table, staring at the pages like they might rearrange themselves into something more palatable. I really thought this was it, she said quietly. I thought Gerard saw something in me that was special, that was worth investing in. Maybe he did. No, he didn't. He saw someone who was flattered by his attention, someone who would look good in photos at charity events, someone who would make him feel important and appreciated. He never saw me as a partner or an equal. I was just another accessory. It was the first moment of real clarity Elena had shown in months. So what now? I asked. Now I sign the NDA, try to rebuild my consulting practice, and pretend the last 3 months never happened. What about us? Elena looked at me across the coffee table, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen since before Gerard Voss entered our lives. She looked like my wife again, instead of someone playing a role in someone else's fantasy. Ian, I know I've been terrible. I know I've been selfish and stupid and completely unfair to you, but is there any chance we could try to work this out? I thought about the divorce papers that had already been filed, about the legal proceedings that were already in motion, about the months of watching Elena disappear into someone else's world while our marriage crumbled. Elena, you didn't just have an affair, you planned a future that didn't include me. You were ready to walk away from 8 years of marriage for a man you'd known for 3 months. I know, but I was wrong. Gerard never cared about me, not really. He was just playing games, and I was too flattered to see it. And what happens the next time someone appreciates you the way Gerard did? What happens when another opportunity comes along that makes you feel special and valued and understood? Elena was quiet for a long time, staring at the NDA that represented the end of her brief career as a billionaire's protégé. I don't know, she said finally. I honestly don't know. Then I think you have your answer. The next morning, Elena signed the NDA and mailed it back to Gerard's lawyers. By afternoon, all traces of the Voss Foundation for Arts and Culture had disappeared from the internet, along with most of the photos of Elena at various high society events. It was like the last 3 months had been erased from the public record. But they hadn't been erased from our marriage, and we both knew it. Elena moved into the guest room that week, and we began the careful dance of 2 people who were still legally married, but no longer really knew each other. She tried to restart her consulting practice, but the clients she'd abandoned for Gerard weren't interested in working with someone who'd proven to be unreliable. She tried to reconnect with friends she'd neglected, but most of them had seen the social media posts and drawn their own conclusions about Elena's priorities. Within a month, Elena had gone from feeling like the most important woman in Boston's cultural scene to feeling completely invisible. I've been thinking about moving, she said one evening over a dinner we ate in silence. Maybe Boston, somewhere I could start over. That might be good for you. I know you hate me, Ian. I know I destroyed everything we had for something that was never real in the first place. I don't hate you, Elena. I'm just disappointed. In me? In us. In the fact that after 8 years of marriage, you were ready to throw it all away for someone who appreciated you the way a collector appreciates a painting. Something beautiful to own and display, but not something to build a life with. Elena started crying then, quietly, like she was trying not to disturb the air around her. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change what it revealed about what you really wanted. What I really wanted was to matter. To feel like I was important, like I was special. You were important, Elena. You were special. Just not to Gerard Voss. But it was too late for that revelation to save our marriage, and we both knew it. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 6 months after Elena had first mentioned Gerard Voss's appreciation. We met at the courthouse with our lawyers, signed papers that dissolved 8 years of marriage in less than an hour, and walked out into the spring sunshine as 2 people who were now legally strangers. Elena had found a small apartment in Cambridge, close enough to Boston to rebuild her consulting practice, but far enough from our suburban social circle to avoid the gossip that still followed her like smoke. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the designer clothes she'd stopped wearing or the expensive jewelry that had mysteriously disappeared from her collection. "I guess this is it," she said, standing on the courthouse steps with her lawyer's business card clutched in her hand like a lifeline. "I guess it is. Ian, I want you to know that I never meant for things to end this way." "I know. I really thought Gerard was offering me something real, a real future, a real partnership, a real chance to be someone important. He was offering you something real, Elena, just not what you thought it was." She nodded, looking out at the traffic moving past the courthouse, at the ordinary Tuesday morning world that was continuing to spin regardless of our personal drama. What he was offering was the chance to be his temporary entertainment, and what you gave up for that was the chance to be someone's permanent priority. I know that now. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. I think you understand that Gerard used you, but I don't think you understand that you let him use you because being used by a billionaire felt more valuable than being loved by me. Elena flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair, isn't it? You had someone who appreciated you every day for 8 years, Elena, someone who thought you were smart and funny and beautiful and worth building a life with. But that wasn't enough, because I wasn't rich enough or important enough or connected enough to make you feel special. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right, and I hate myself for it. I don't want you to hate yourself. I want you to understand what you had, so maybe you won't make the same mistake again. What if there isn't a next time? What if I ruined my one chance at having someone who really cared about me? I looked at Elena, standing there on the courthouse steps, looking lost and broken and genuinely sorry for the first time since this whole mess started. Then you'll have learned an expensive lesson about the difference between being appreciated and being valued. We said goodbye there, awkwardly, like former co-workers who'd run into each other at a conference. Elena got into her car, the modest sedan she'd bought after returning the luxury vehicle Gerard had leased for her, and drove away toward her new life in Cambridge. I went back to my office, where Kira was waiting with a cup of coffee and a stack of paperwork that needed my attention. "How did it go?" she asked. "It went. It's over. How do you feel?" I thought about that for a moment, taking inventory of my emotional state, like I was checking the condition of a property after a storm. Relieved, mostly. Sad, but relieved. Any regrets? About the divorce? No. About the marriage? Plenty. Kira nodded, understanding without needing details. She'd watched the whole thing unfold, had seen Elena's transformation from dissatisfied wife to billionaire's protege to cautionary tale. "You know, my cousin told me something interesting last week," Kira said, settling back into her chair. "About Gerard Voss? About his wife. Apparently Charlotte Voss has been making some changes to their social calendar. They're spending more time in Europe, less time at local events. Word is that Gerard's been encouraged to focus on his health and his established business interests. And his appreciation of young women seems to be on hiatus. Charlotte's hired a new social secretary, someone whose job it is to manage Gerard's public interactions. Very professional, very controlled." I had to admire Charlotte Voss's thoroughness. She hadn't just eliminated Elena as a problem. She'd restructured Gerard's entire social life to prevent future problems. "What about Elena?" Kira asked. "Have you heard how she's doing?" "She's trying to rebuild her consulting practice. It's been slow going." "I imagine it would be. Hard to explain a 6-month gap in your professional history when you can't talk about what you were actually doing." That was the cruelest part of Charlotte Voss's strategy. Elena couldn't even use her brief time as Gerard's protege as a learning experience or a cautionary tale. The NDA meant she had to pretend it had never happened, which made it impossible to explain why she'd abandoned her clients or what she'd learned from the experience. Life settled into a new routine over the following months. I focused on growing my property management business, took on some new clients, even started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinner with women who weren't looking to trade up to billionaires. Elena became a cautionary tale that circulated through our old social circle, a reminder of what happened when you confused being appreciated with being valued. I heard updates occasionally, usually through Kira's network of connections. Elena was struggling to rebuild her client base, was living modestly in her Cambridge apartment, had been seen at a few professional networking events looking like she was trying very hard to blend into the background. She asked about you, Kira mentioned one afternoon, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. What did she want to know? If you were seeing anyone, how the business was doing, whether you seemed happy. And what did you tell her? That you were doing well, that you seemed more relaxed than you had in years, and that it was none of her business. I laughed, appreciating Kira's protective instincts. She also asked if you ever talked about her. What did you say to that? That you'd moved on, which seemed to be something she was having trouble doing. It was true. I had moved on, in ways that surprised me. The end of my marriage to Elena had been painful, but it had also been liberating. I no longer had to watch someone I cared about systematically devalue everything we'd built together. I no longer had to pretend not to notice when she looked at our life and found it wanting. A year after the divorce, I ran into Elena at Murphy's pub. She was sitting alone at the bar, nursing a glass of wine and looking like someone who'd learned some hard lessons about the difference between dreams and reality. "Ian," she said when she saw me. "How are you?" "I'm well. You?" "Getting by. Building something new. Slowly." She looked older, more serious, like someone who'd had her illusions stripped away and was still figuring out what was left underneath. "I heard your business is doing well," she said. "It is. Steady growth, good clients, no drama." "That sounds nice. Drama is overrated." We talked for a few minutes about neutral topics: the weather, changes in the neighborhood, mutual acquaintances who'd moved away or gotten married or started new careers. It was the kind of conversation you have with someone you used to know well, but no longer have much in common with. "Ian," Elena said as I was getting ready to leave, "I want you to know that I finally understand what you meant, about being appreciated versus being valued." "Oh?" "Gerard appreciated me the way someone appreciates a sunset or a piece of art. It was pleasant for him, but it didn't change anything fundamental about his life. You valued me the way someone values a partner, someone who's integral to their daily happiness and long-term plans. And now you understand the difference? Now I understand that appreciation is something you feel, but value is something you invest. Gerard never invested anything real in me. You invested 8 years. I nodded, recognizing the wisdom that comes from painful experience. I hope you find someone who values you, Elena. Really values you. I hope so too. But first, I need to learn to value myself the way you valued me. I need to understand my own worth before I can expect someone else to see it. I left Murphy's that night, feeling like Elena and I had finally had the conversation we should have had a year earlier, before lawyers and legal papers and the formal dissolution of everything we'd built together. She was learning the lessons she needed to learn, but she was learning them too late to save our marriage. That was the last time I saw Elena. I heard she eventually moved to Portland, where she started a small marketing consultancy focused on helping nonprofit organizations. Word was that she was doing well, had found her niche, was building something sustainable and meaningful. I hoped that was true. I hoped she'd learned to distinguish between the temporary thrill of being appreciated by someone impressive and the lasting satisfaction of being valued by someone who mattered. I hoped she'd found someone who saw her as more than an accessory to their lifestyle, someone who invested in her happiness rather than just enjoying it. but mostly, I hoped she'd learned to appreciate herself enough that she'd never again mistake being used for being loved. As for Gerard Voss, he disappeared from the local social scene entirely. Charlotte moved their primary residence to Monaco, where Gerard could focus on his art collection and his health, while she managed their various business interests from a safe distance. The Voss name still appeared on charity boards and cultural organizations, but always represented by professional staff rather than family members. The billionaire who'd appreciated my wife had been efficiently managed back into the controlled environment where he belonged, and the wife who'd appreciated him had learned the difference between being someone's entertainment and being someone's priority. In the end, Elena got exactly what she'd asked for. She was appreciated by a billionaire. She just discovered that being appreciated and being valued were two completely different things, and that the difference between them could cost everything you'd never realized you wanted to keep. The appreciation ended, as it always does, but the lesson lasted forever.